So our guest today is Marianne Boos from Austria, a dear friend of mine, and I was so surprised and happy at the same time when she accepted doing a workshop for us. Surprised because I knew she usually does in-house trainings, so not open trainings like this one. And also happy because I enjoy so much her presence, and you will see in her presentation she uses metaphors in order to help you take in a concept. So I'm really sure you will learn a lot from this meeting, and I won't go further. I would talk about her more and more, but we only have 1 hour or so today, and I will let her begin. Welcome, Marianne. Welcome to NVC Connect. And thank you very much for being here with us and sharing with us your knowledge.
Well, thank you very much. Welcome, everybody. I'm a little bit nervous. It's my premiere to give a training via internet, so please, I hope it works out fine. I understand, and I now also got to know that you are sitting in all different countries. So this is new for me too. I'm normally doing my trainings in Austria. And well, I was told that I could do anything I'm interested at or what I would like to do. So be aware, it could take hours. Yeah, actually, I thought about what to do. And well, as I wasn't sure, and I was told that not everybody is accustomed with the concept of nonviolent communication. And this is normally also the case when I do my communication trainings. People are not coming, or mostly not coming, because they want to know anything about nonviolent communication, but they come because they want to improve their communication skills. So I thought I'd share with you what more or less I would do with them at the beginning. And yes, thank you for attending and giving me this possibility to try it out, something new. And I will try to start with the first one. So this was actually my motto, my mixing, when Marty asked me what, to write an invitation, because this message or saying I came across years ago, and I thought it was very true for me and very helpful for me. So it's not what happens to you, but how you react to that matters actually. And so I wanted to put this at the beginning. I thought about talking a little bit about my attitude, or why I'm dealing with NVC, or why I'm dealing with communication in the first point. And so another thing that seems quite important to me is that very often we have expectations, but they don't always come true, or very often they don't come true. And so it's perhaps necessary to drop expectations, also if I'm communicating with other people, and go with the flow of life. And this picture for me symbolizes to go with the flow of life, yeah, to enjoy life, to take how it comes, to try it out, and yeah, sometimes just to jump from a ship into the blue ocean. And the far right lady here is my elder daughter, Anna. And so we were together on this ship, and I did jump afterwards, but the youngers went first. So only after that I got inspired and motivated to jump as well. So this is about, yeah, being in the flow of life, and it's easier said than done. And I'm trying hard. So I think also looking for other methods that could help me in communicating with myself and with other people. I think this is one of the aims I'm I'm going forward to. And to be open, curious. Of course, we have to close down once in a while and to reflect and take in. But then sometimes it's also helpful to be able to open up again and to have some tools that can help opening up again. And so one guy I would like to mention is Marshall Rosenberg. He's the founder of Nonviolent Communication. And I happened to come across his ideas and methods and tools about 15 years ago. So I would like to kind of give you a short overview of his concept, but then stick to one point, the one step or one key, you could say, that is called, well, the observation part. Because when I talk to my participants, and they don't know anything about NVC, that's something I really want them to take home with. Why it is important to train ourselves to observe and not always to interpret what we do anyway. So he was actually also a guy who kind of showed me a way or gave me an important tool to help me on this way of being or becoming more compassionate with myself and also with others. And that's what actually is, I think his message was and his mission was all over the years, to let people know how they can develop this quality of being compassionate with oneself and with others. What one of his points, you know, every kind of teacher perhaps has something that seems important for you or is new for you. And for me, Marshall Rosenberg focused very much also on the importance of needs. And I hadn't found this in other methods, communication methods, the way he is using it. So one of his messages was that we human beings, what connects us all is that we all have needs that we you know, try to fulfill to stay alive or to stay happy or to stay active or whatever. So it is actually about whatever we do to fulfill a need of ours. And this idea, I think, is quite important. And for me, it was new and very helpful. But today, I don't want to stick with that. I think Christian from Denmark, she already talked about needs. So I will go on to give you a picture of the whole process. And there is, yeah, a colleague, a really dear colleague of mine from England, Richard Belgrave, who introduced this kind of picture structure to me when I was learning and being trained. And I changed it a little bit, but the main facts are actually identical. So I found it quite interesting, even if you don't want to have anything to do with nonviolent communication, to have a look at these two frames. And it's one frame says, be aware if you're in a communication process or perhaps even in a conflict, and you have a little time to stop and to think, you could ask yourself, what is my intention right here? Do I want to win? Do I want to be right? Or do I want to be connected to the person in front of me or to the group in front of me? If I'm a trainer and I have, let's say, some difficulties with my participants or with my kids, for example. So it's not only one person, it could be more than one. So the main topic or the main intention of NVC, of nonviolent communication, is to connect, to be connected. And so we try to do things, or we try to leave out things that would not help us getting into connection with the other person. And then the second question you could ask yourself is, where is my focus? And that would mean is in nonviolent communication, we try to stay in the present. So we take every incident as if it would happen the first time. And only these two things I found out can be very helpful. Because a lot of times if we have discussions, let's say with my kids, I would say, well, why can't you ever help me? You know, you're never here if there is work to do. So this would imply the never, you're never, or you're always late. Yeah, I did tell my husband quite often, I think, when we, in earlier years, you're always late. You say you will be home by 8 and now it's 9 o'clock at night. So I would say you're always late. And that means the story, our history, our common history is getting into the actual incident. And it is helpful to keep that out. And normally, perhaps you know, and if you I'm sure that you are experienced with relationships, the longer we know each other, the bigger gets our backpack. And so there are kind of hurts and pains and stuff in there. And we tend to kind of throw or put the whole stuff into the actual situation, which makes it not really easy to deal with it. So it can be helpful to stay in the present and take this incident today as being the first one. But Marshall Rosenberg had some other good ideas about how we could improve our way of communicating. And that was, he kind of came upon 4 steps, or you could say 4 keys. He said that as we are very often, when I'm saying you're always late, I wouldn't say that that is an observation. The observation could be that we agreed on, or that he told me that he would be home by 8, and now it's 9 o'clock. So that would mean, if I say it this way, doesn't it sound differently? You know, to say you're always late, or hey, we agreed that you will be home by 8, and now it's 9. So he could look at his watch and he could say, oh, really? Yeah, it's already that late. And then he said it is helpful, as we are very often putting these things together, how we feel and what we experience, we kind of mix it together. And so it could be helpful to kind of divide it into pieces. And so the observation would be what I just said. And now I could say my feelings. Perhaps I'm irritated because I was waiting for him for more than an hour, or have my food in the oven and it's getting burned. And then was this very important point that Marshall Rosenberg said, that very often we say, I feel irritated because you are late. So you are the one to blame. So my husband, for example, would be the one to blame. And yeah, so Marshall Rosenberg said, if you could divide that and talk about your need instead of what the other person does wrong, that could help him being connected with you. So if I could say I have a need of consideration, for example, and I could even say a request in the way of, could you tell me what kept you so long in the office? I thought you were leaving already. That might be that he's more eager or more willing to hear me and be connected or be in connection with me. Yeah, and what you see on the right-hand side, this lady, you could use these 4 steps in 3 different ways. Like the way I just said was like I was expressing myself. Another way could be that I, first of all, I connect with myself. I realize that he isn't home by 8. I realize that he isn't home by 8:30. So I could actually connect with myself and say, hey, how I am feeling and what need isn't met. So I could kind of get some kind of reflection or preparation before he comes home. I have to admit I didn't do that in earlier days, but I didn't know about NVC at that time. I was quite good in reproaches or criticism, so that was really helpful for me to find out that there was another way. A third way of using these 4 steps could also be in receiving him. And then the observation could be still the same. Hey, we agreed on 8 o'clock and now it's 9. Was there so much to do in the office? Did you feel stressed and wanted to finish something? So that would be the more way of empathically connecting with him and finding out what kept him from coming home at a certain time. As I told Marty and Salil, I would really like to focus on the observing part, because as I already told you, if I'm, for example, giving my lecture at university, that's something I want my students to go home with, to have this distinction between observing, interpretation, evaluation. And so here just perhaps people who are in the NVC world know this, that the observing without evaluating is the highest form of human intelligence, that Krishnamurti said this, and I would agree with him. And I would also say that it's not at all easy to do this. And so I would like to give you a tool or talk about a little bit about our perception process, and also share with you a tool that I find extremely helpful, although it doesn't come from the NVC world, I would say, but from more the corporate organizational learning field. I took it out of Peter Senges, an American consultant who works a lot with organizations. And yeah, before I would now invite you to have a look at the next picture and see what you can see. Just see what you can observe and what you can see, and whether you can see 2 or 1 or 2 kind of pictures in this one picture. And perhaps would that be a possibility for them, you know, for the to write it down, what they see, so that you could see this, Madi, or?
Yeah, they can write in the chat if they want to share.
If they want to share, that would be great.
Yeah, of course. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. It takes a while until people will write. Yeah, a horn player and face. I see a man with a saxophone or a horn, a man playing an instrument, a man with a bullet coming towards him. Imaging.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, these are the the answers. A girl also. I see a kidney.
A kidney, okay, that must be a medicine guy or girl or woman, huh?
Salil says that. It says man with a saxophone.
Yeah, yeah.
So I guess most people see first the shadow, the black part of the image. They can process more rapidly, and then if they can focus on the other part. A bird feeding, says Zelda.
A bird feeding.
Yes.
Okay. Okay, so you see, we all look at the same picture, and still we some of us see different things. Is there anybody who only sees one thing, like only the saxophone player or only the woman, for example?
Yes, Salil says just one.
Okay.
Parul, the same.
The same. Uh-huh. So this is actually what I try to do with my students. I show them a film, a sequence of a film, without being muted, so they don't know what people talk in this scene. And then after this, I ask them to give me observations and to give me their interpretation. And that wasn't possible here, so I choose this picture, because at least I can also show that we can see 2 pictures, but one of us might only see one and the other one might see the other one. And so we could go on discussing what we see if we are just in the interpretation. And very often people would say, no, that's not right. I see a saxophone player. The other one say, no, come on, what are you talking about? There is no saxophone player here. Because the other one sees the woman. And to be aware of this, I found out is quite important and will lead me to the next slide actually, and the next part. That again, like if you have an observation, that is something I learned from NVC, you really go for the observable facts. So I could see, you know, you see this black nose going out there, or to see this could be the eyes of the person. So I really talk about what a camera could also record, information that is really, people can see it or can hear it. And I try to talk about this, what I can see. I can hear you telling me we need this done by Friday, for example. And this is what I'm reacting at, yeah? And so this seems not so easy, I find out, because my students, I don't know how it is with you, they normally are much more at ease with their interpretations. And it's nothing wrong about interpretation. The only thing is that I found out, for example, with these film scenes, that sometimes one or two are pretty close to what happens in this film scene with what they see and how they interpret it. But then we have a wide variety and range of explanations what's happening in this film scene. And so in this picture, it might not be that big a range, but still we had a bird feeding, a bullet coming. So we had also sorts of different things people would see in this picture. And this, for me, is a very important message if I'm communicating. So it's something that we can do, and I will come to that in my next slide with the perception. Our brain, oh yeah, I would like, first of all, say, I have these three differentiations that you can observe, you can interpret, and you can evaluate. And so everybody probably knows this glass is half full or half empty, and it makes a whole of a difference if you look at the situation which is half full or half empty. And there's still a one step further if we say, I find that great, or I find that I'm neutral, or I hate it, you know. So this is also something for me, important to keep in mind. And normally we are more on this, let's say, interpreting and evaluating part, and not so much in the observing part. It seems we don't learn that so easily or so naturally when we grow up. Yeah, so just a short hint to the perception process, because I found it quite interesting how we filter, how we take out information, and how we process it in ourselves. And so we could distinguish between three parts, like there is the selection process, there is an interpretation process, and an organization process. And I will this time only focus a little bit on the selection. So how we filter our information depends a lot how we were socialized, in which culture we grew up, which, you know, customs in the family, how things were done. But what also helps us to filter the immensity of information that comes into us are our emotions. And so, for example, when we get angry, in German, there is a saying, if you get angry, your brain leaves. So normally it narrows down what we can take in. Of course, needs and interests are a big, important way of selecting. What we are expecting is also something that kind of influences our perception, and also the context and situation we are in. But I just wanted to say this because very often in the NVC world, we don't talk about it, and I find it important to do so. it is also these categories perhaps that we need to organize information. I mean, this is all very necessary. All three are necessary. Otherwise, we wouldn't be working or living with our families, but perhaps be kept in an institution because we will be overwhelmed by what comes to us and to our thoughts. The thing I want to go into a practical, first show it to you and then give you 3 practical examples is the following. I hope it is here. Yeah. This starts with this one. I don't find it easy, but I find it helpful to leave this part of being wrong or being right. And so here is another saying of one of Rumi, that out beyond ideas of wrongdoing and right doing, there is a field and I meet you there. And I think the next method for me is a tool to help me go a different or take a different path or go to a different field, let's say. And this is the leather of inference from Rick Ross and Chris Aguirre's. And I find it extremely helpful because it shows how we, that people don't see the same or don't experience the same, but very seldomly talk about it. And very often we take it for granted that the other person has the same point of view that we have. And exactly that we have this need to be right and the other person is wrong. So this ladder of inference is actually a graphic representation of our thinking process. And normally we step up this ladder unconsciously. So this goes very quickly, actually. I could see, let's say, a lady with a bag. I have the same bag, and I think, well, she's a cool person, or she has taste, or whatever. So we will kind of step up very easily. And normally, we don't talk about these different steps, but we see what happens at the bottom, and we might see what is the action taken after that. And so why I do like it so much, it's about becoming aware that we all go through these processes, and that sometimes it's important to consciously ask ourselves what happens or how did we step up this lever, because this can elevate tensions between people and for creating new alternatives. And so I prepared some examples which I would like to present to you. My first example came from one of my participants, and the situation was that she was working in a non-profit organization, and she very much liked her job. She had a not a fixed term contract, so this was coming to an end, and the management hadn't talked to her about the extension of the contract. So that would be at the bottom of the ladder. That would be the observable facts, that she had a fixed term contract and that the management hadn't come up to her to talk about the renewal of the contract or the extension of the contract. So from all the observable data, which could be there, that she liked the job, that she liked her colleagues, whatever, what she took out was that the management didn't approach her. And so how she interpreted this data, that the management hadn't talked to her about the extension, the way that she said, well, the management doesn't want to extend my contract because there is no budget. It was a non-profit organization. Non-profit organizations normally have difficulties in funding. So that was actually how she interpreted it. And then further, she stepped up to develop theories and beliefs that explain her interpretation. And so she stepped up and she told herself that nonprofit organizations suffer from chronic funding problems and therefore are actually bad employers. And so it might be better for her and for her career, if she doesn't want to risk her career, to change and find a job in a private company, in a profit company. And so that was actually the step she wanted to take, to look for a new job. And she did tell, that was the action, she did tell the management that she didn't want to extend her contract. Yeah. As you probably see, that she didn't talk to them, she didn't ask them what was the reason for not coming up to her. And what else is a very important thing to know is that what we do, if we have these beliefs and theories about things, they normally go help us select the information again. So this is a kind of reflexive loop that we always base our selection on our theories and beliefs. So what we don't believe, we don't see, yeah? Or what we have no experience with, we will not take in the same way other people will do. And so it's a kind of self-enforcement. And that, I think, makes it even more important that we know about it, that we kind of self-enforce ourselves. So perhaps if there, can I ask you, Madi, again, if there is any question from the others listening to me?
At the moment, there's no question in the chat regarding what you've said so far. I don't know if people have questions right now and they want to ask one. They can write in the chat, or they can unmute themselves or raise their hands.
Yeah, and it'll also be nice if we wait for a minute just to have them, because give them an opportunity to ask questions right now.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, sure.
Because it's about 40 minutes I've been talking, and I think perhaps somebody would like to share or to ask a question.
And once the presentation is over, we can, if you switch off the presentation, then we will be able to see everybody, and then we'll have more.
Oh, that would be great too. I just actually, I don't want to put in too much more. I just prepared 2 more examples.
Yeah, if the slides are there, Ronnie is raising a hand.
Okay.
So you can, yeah, maybe unmute Ronnie. Yeah.
Hi, yes, I'm finding this very, very interesting. I think that one of the things that I agree, one of the things we don't do with NVC is talk about what you've just presented here. And it gives us, looking at it, it gives us more information that we can use as to how we can intervene to actually get what we want, rather than making assumptions based on our beliefs and theories. I'm liking it very much.
Thank you. Fine. Mm-hmm. Great.
Anyone else? I see no signs.
Yeah.
Okay, then I just perhaps go on with another example, which may also say why I think it can be helpful. Also in this combination with NVC, I really thank Ronnie for her statement. Well, another situation that was, I just got mixed up, was like a mother. She she had her son in kindergarten, and she was called by the kindergarten teacher, who had a kind of irritation in her voice. And she wanted to know why the mother brought the son to the kindergarten, although she said he was groggy and seemed to be ill. So this was actually, say what was the situation. And then what the mother took out of this situation was the irritated voice. She said there was some irritation. So that was what she took out. And her interpretation was, this kindergarten teacher is hysterical. She's actually overacting. And then the next step was, and there it could be changing, and that's why I find it also quite helpful. She could stay with this kindergarten teacher is hysterical and overacting. And then her belief was, this teacher will cause me a lot of problems in the future, and I have to be careful. And if she goes this way, then she could, for example, say, well, better I call my mother right away so she can pick up this kid, otherwise we will get into trouble. And so the action could be, she calls up her mother. The other way could also be that, hearing this irritation in the voice of the kindergarten teacher, she could go, as we say, to listen to this kindergarten teacher and think about what could be her belief system or her theories. And so she could also ask, what is, like in NVC, we would say, what is her need? So she could say, well, perhaps this kindergarten teacher it's not irritation, but she is concerned. She's concerned that if the son is ill, he might infect the other kids. And so this could lead to an action that she talks to the kindergarten teacher the next day, or I don't know, when she sees her again, and say, well, hey, was it that you were concerned, that my son could infect the other kids? And in fact, that was, for example, in this case, was exactly the case, that the kindergarten teacher was concerned about the other kids, and that was why she was calling and was kind of, I don't know what you say, not irritated perhaps, but pressing the point that it was important to pick up the kid. So this is, like, for me, a combination how you could use the leather, that you can either find out the way you are going up the steps. So what is going on? What are your theories? What is your belief system? Or you could also do it for the other person or for the other persons. And so it comes to the point that you ask questions. So you go into a process, you go into asking inquiry, what's the whole thing about, and not just taking it as it comes without going into contact. And my last example that happened to me, and I just wanted to share, as I know that there is now an intercultural people here listening to it, was, and I find it still funny because I don't know whether you know, but we had quite a lot of Syrian refugees in Austria about 2 years ago. And so we were also asked whether we could give living space to these peoples. And as we have an apartment, and this was just free at that moment, we got a Syrian family living with us. Also not with us, but in this apartment. And so what was actually the situation was that we decided to lend this Syrian family the flat, who had got asylum in Austria, and the flat wasn't furnished and there was no household goods in the flat. So what we took out of that is that we thought these people will not be able to buy all this stuff. So we asked our friends to help us getting furniture, getting household supplies. And as an Austrian family, we thought something that's very important, of course, is having beds to sleep in and have a table and chairs. So we tried to get tables and chairs. And then the funny thing is that we had these tables, and we had the table and we had the chairs. And the first thing the lady said when she came into the flat and saw all this, she said, "Are there no carpets?" And what happened now is that whenever I come, I see that they only bring this chair into the middle of the room when I come to visit, or my family comes to visit. But if they are by themselves, you know, they don't need the chairs and the table because they sit on the carpets, which they got quite quickly. And that showed me, you know, how, for me, it's a funny thing that how you act on your beliefs and theories and what you are used to in your life. And so, yeah, it needs situations like that to make you see that people might have different needs and would go for different things, belonging or furniture or carpets or whatever. And if you don't talk about it, it can easily go into what I don't know how you say this in English, but we would say it goes into your wrong throat. So we could, for example, say, well, they're not thankful, they're unthankful, or yeah, whatever. So this is what I wanted to finish and to just say why I do think this level of inference is quite helpful, also dealing with communication and also in combination with NVC, because as I want to just go further, this helps me again to go to this observation part. So to improve one's ability to observe is very helpful if you want to identify what is actually the incident we are reacting to. It is important if we want to establish a common ground. It is also important because it leaves room for correction, and it sifts out, as I already said, about this interpretation part, to be clear what is my interpretation and what is actually the observable fact. And yeah, with this, I would like to come to an end, and thank you very much for being attentive and listening to me. And if there are questions or anything you want to share, I would really love to hear it. And I'm going to close my presentation down now. Oh, there is one more, but you will have this anyway if you want to contact me. Here are my contact information, bits and bytes. So now I think.
Now we can see you as well. Okay, thank you, Marianne, for this presentation. I don't know about others if they have questions, remarks, or would you have? Do you have, Marianne?
Caroline has something to say.
Okay, Caroline, I unmuted you, so go on.
Thank you. Marianne, this was really fascinating. I loved the background information on selective perception and interpretation. That's really interesting and valuable. What this reminded me of was a time when I had a disagreement with a close friend. And we were talking about it after a year's time. And we could not agree. Luckily, I had NVC skills, and I was trying to establish a common observation from which to go forward. We couldn't agree on the facts. But because our intention was connection, we agreed that, okay, there's no way to verify what really happened, but our intention for connection is stronger than the need to be right or accurate. And we were able to move on to a really nice, deep reconnection again. So I'm just celebrating that, that I love the neutrality of starting. So safe, and we can, if our intention is larger, then even if the observation isn't held in common, it's okay. So that's all.
Okay, anybody else?
Okay, I have a question for Marianne.
Yeah.
Marianne, you've spoken about evaluations, and I'm assuming that the ladder model can be used similarly for judgments.
Yes.
Yeah.
Actually, yes, you could, of course, yeah, normally, because in going up the ladder, like there would be, you could also say this theories, beliefs, quite often there could be judgments like, I don't know, gypsies are always stealing, or people who do this or that are. So this is, yes, this can be all sorts of we normally have like, very often actually we do this organizing of information goes in pattern, and so we do have patterns how we and then we call people this, like for example in Austria we found out that there is more people are being controlled, like being asked for their identification, and they will take much more men with beards than, let's say, women. Yeah, because they think there are Islamists, or there could be some kind of danger for people. And so, yes, of course, you could use that. Yeah.
Thank you.
And as I'm always training a lot of teachers, I'm very specific about that, because there also studies show that as soon as you have a certain expectation of a pupil, you will deal differently with him or with her. And so there are studies that they took a couple of kids and they told them, randomly that these were brilliant kids, and the other group were not good ones, they were dumb. And at the end of the year, it was the way that the ones who were expected to be brilliant, they were brilliant, and the others were dumb. And so this is something I find kind of important for my students, as they're going to be teachers or trainers and work with other people, to know about this and to be careful and to even more develop this ability to make concrete observations.
Thank you. It was useful because it also gave me an idea about what I am doing with my evaluations. At what stage am I interpreting certain things? So that's the ladder model was very useful for me.
And I think we do have to evaluate. It's not about not doing it, but to be aware that we do it, and to also get to know better on what criteria do I evaluate. Yeah, what are my criteria? And so NVC for me helps a lot, because there I can ask what are my needs, So if I'm giving, I have to do exams or I have to give grades at university, for example, and to have a kind of an idea, what am I, what is my evaluation, on what facts, can I have some observations, can I tell them it's because of this and that. Yeah.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Also in the chat, Naveni shared with us, said the whole conversation today reinforced me to be on the path in what I'm already doing. Thank you so much.
Oh, thank you. Great.
And goes on, I'm a yoga therapist and studied Yoga Sutras in depth and trying to practice regularly meditative practices. This was, and also Caroline came in and said, I appreciate this presentation, the background information on how our perception works and relates to how we evaluate. My needs for learning, insight, and community are well met.
Thank you.
Marianne, we will share with you, Marianne, the chat and
yes, that's great. Thank you.
What everybody said. This was.
So any more questions? People can unmute themselves and ask, or we can unmute for you if you just raise your hand. Yes, Carolyn, please go ahead.
One very helpful insight for me in along the path of learning NVC was when it was pointed out that evaluation in terms of people being good or bad or in judgment is not so useful, but that we, as you said, that we do need to evaluate. And what really clarified this for me was the learning that evaluation relative to what meets my needs or doesn't meet my needs is a really good use of that. So anything that you would have to, any comment that you would make on that, I would appreciate.
I don't know whether there is anything to comment, because I would say that's the point. That I'm really happy that you brought that up, because this is actually also the connection for me. That NVC, being so need-based, gives you a kind of, that needs are a way of evaluating how I react to things or how I feel about things. Yeah. And if I'm enjoying, like if my students, for example, they send me their papers with a certain layout, I tell them, I do enjoy that, because if I have to read, I don't know how many pages, it's just fun, to see a funny image somewhere, and or if it's well structured, it helps me to focus. And so, yes, I would say this is what I learned in NVC, and which I am so happy about, because I didn't know how to do this beforehand, I would say. And I realized that it makes a difference with my connection with them, for example. Also telling them that, of course, they have to do this paper if they want to get the grade, yeah? And still, I can tell them that I'm enjoying to getting these papers and getting this reflection. And that makes a difference. And I think I wouldn't have done that before. And I know, I see with teachers, they very seldom interact with their pupils in this way. And I had an example with when my daughter was short before her final exams. I went to see a teacher of hers, and she was suddenly, her face was getting all bright, and she was saying, well, she's so much enjoying these final exams, these oral exams, because sometimes she has these pupils from 10 years old until 18. And then you could see their development, and you can see what they all learned and what they can talk about so freely when they are 18. And I didn't know her, so I didn't dare to ask. But I thought, is she telling her pupils that? Is she telling her students that? And then shortly after, a couple of minutes later, I met my daughter, and I told her about this. And I said, is this teacher telling you that she's, so much enjoying you where you are right now and what you are able to do? And she looked at me and said, no, never. She's always telling me we have to learn more, we have to study more, So I thought, wow, come on. Isn't that a pity? I mean, wouldn't that be such a great chance to connect with the whole classroom or with people? And this is something I'm really celebrating about the coming upon NVC, actually. Yeah. So yes, I enjoyed it very much, what you said, Caroline. Mm.
Yeah, I have a question, Marianne. Would you recommend some practices where this whole faculty of observation becomes sharpened? Like observation is also like a skill or a faculty, I would say.
I would say so, yes.
In your experience and would you have a recommendation for any practice that one has to theoretically understand it? Yes, we all know observation is very important.
Well, for example, sometimes I do it watching movies. I love watching movies, and as I am, you know, I don't have anything to do, so I try to do this, and to see what can I see and what do I like to mute a scene and then just have a look at it. I mean, I don't have like, what I do with my students is that I send them out to observe situations. So this is a practice I would give them. I say one is to go outside in a coffee house or a restaurant, or sometimes it's train or buses or whatever, and just observe and write it down. And I think the writing down is important because we are not used to kind of really find words for certain observation. Then I found out, for example, mimic seems to be even more difficult to observe because we are so much easier interpreting the mimic already. So to say somebody's smiling is not so easy to put it into an observation. They say, yeah, the lips go up and eyes are open or whatever. So gestics are more easily put down, I found out. Yeah.
Ronnie?
Ronnie, yeah. And then Caroline.
Yes, Ronnie?
I think is really helpful that is having an attitude of curiosity, like what's going on here, instead of the way very often we'll go in and we'll make an assessment of what's going on. We can say, hey, what do you think those people might be talking about? What do you think the relationship, I'm using your example of going into a cafe. What is the relationship between those two people? And just to activate our curiosity more and more.
Exactly, yes. I like that very much. Yes.
What I find most difficult when I'm trying to make a clear evaluation is when there is a tone of voice change. Because, you know, somebody might say, you're yelling. And I might say, you know, I raised my tone of voice, there was tension in my voice. But it's very difficult to describe tone of voice without some evaluation. And I don't know if you can make any suggestions on that, I would very much appreciate it. It's hard.
This I would like to put it in the open because as you said, I do find this quite difficult as well. Yes.
I guess one way, because one thing I'm learning to do sometimes is to fold in an observation of my thought, the thought that arises as part of an observation. So I might, maybe it could be helpful to say, you know, I saw myself thinking that that there was tension in your voice. And then maybe do a connection request, ask the person to validate that. I don't know, that's one thing that comes to mind.
I mean, perhaps I wouldn't, or I've just thought about this, perhaps sometimes I wouldn't go for the part that I express myself, but I would perhaps go more for the, if I think there is a tension, go for the empathizing part. So it's just me, as you said, me thinking that there could be a tension, but I perhaps wouldn't utter it. I wouldn't say it.
Right, yeah.
But I would kind of try to connect or to empathize with the person.
Yeah,
by thinking that there is a tension in the voice. And then sometimes there's a common ground, like my eldest daughter you saw on the picture, and me, for example, she told me when we would start quarreling, then at one point we agreed, and she would say, hey mom, you already have this voice, or you have this voice again. And then that would be a stop signal for the two of us. And she was more sensitive to this typical voice, mom voice. So, and I would accept this without discussion normally. And then we would stop talking and we would go different ways and wait some time until we would come again. But that was because we had this shared understanding that that wasn't helpful for us. So if you don't have the shared understanding, perhaps I would go more for the empathy part. Because I do think it is quite tricky to express that. Yeah, if the other person would say no, or how come, or what do you think, or no, come on, you always with this psychological stuff. Yeah, so I find this kind of tricky, yeah.
So everyone, the hour we set for this meeting is gone. I don't know when it went. For me, it was something so enjoyable that, and I learned so much. Thank you, Marianne, for being with us today and sharing this this knowledge with us. I find it very useful. In the chat, we also have thank yous. I will share them with you and appreciation. We will share with you the contact details of Marianne if you want to contact her at some point. And also you will have the recording of this